For 8 months, shelter workers couldn't understand how Cooper kept escaping. Every morning, the golden Labrador was gone from his locked kennel. Every morning, he sat outside waiting to be let back in. Where did he go? What was he doing in the dark streets of Sacramento? When they finally followed him, what they discovered wasn't just heartbreaking. It was the most beautiful love story they had ever witnessed. This is the true story of a veteran who lost everything but never gave up hope, and the dog who risked everything to prove that real love never abandons family. The security camera at the Sacramento County Animal Shelter clicked on at exactly 2:30 a.m. The red light blinked once in the darkness. Then it caught something that made no sense at all. A golden Labrador was walking free down the long hallway between the kennels. Cooper moved like a ghost through the shelter. His paws made no sound on the cold floor. Other dogs slept quietly in their cages. They didn't bark or whine. It was like they knew this was Cooper's special time. The big dog stopped at the front desk. He looked up at the camera with his soft brown eyes. For just a moment, it seemed like he was saying goodbye. Then he turned and walked toward the back of the building. Cooper had been living at the shelter for 8 long months. He was 3 years old and had the most beautiful golden coat anyone had ever seen. His eyes were the color of chocolate, and they always looked a little sad. Even when he wagged his tail, his eyes stayed sad. Every person who worked at the shelter loved Cooper. He never barked too much. He never bit. He always sat when they told him to sit. He shook hands when they asked. He was the perfect dog. But somehow, no one ever took him home. "He's too big," some people said. "We want a puppy," others would say. "He seems sad," was another excuse. Month after month, Cooper waited. He watched other dogs get adopted. He saw families come and go. He waited for someone to choose him, but it never happened. Now Cooper was doing something that should have been impossible. He was walking free through the shelter in the middle of the night. The camera followed him as he moved down the back hallway. He stopped at a door that led to the outdoor kennels. The door had a handle that turned. Cooper stood on his back legs and pushed the handle with his front paws. The door opened. Cooper walked outside into the cold February night. The moon was bright overhead. He could see his breath in the chilly air. But he didn't seem cold. He seemed happy. Behind him, the door swung shut with a soft click. At 6:15 a.m., Maria Santos unlocked the front door of the shelter. She had worked there for 5 years. She loved all the animals, but Cooper was special. She always brought him extra treats. She always took time to pet him and tell him he was a good boy. Maria walked to Cooper's kennel with his breakfast. The kennel was empty. "Cooper?" she called. "Cooper, where are you?" She looked in the kennel next to his. She looked in the play area. She looked in the office. Cooper was nowhere to be found. Maria's heart started beating fast. She ran to find her boss, Tom Rodriguez. Tom had been running the shelter for 10 years. He had seen everything, but he had never seen anything like this. "Cooper's gone," Maria said, trying not to cry. "His kennel is empty, but the door is still locked." Tom looked at Cooper's kennel. The latch was down tight. There was no way a dog could open it from the inside. The fence around the outdoor area was 6 feet tall. No dog could jump that high. "How did he get out?" Tom asked. They looked everywhere. They checked every door, every window, every inch of fence. Everything was locked up tight. Then Maria heard barking from the front of the building. "That sounds like Cooper," she said. They ran to the front door. There was Cooper, sitting on the sidewalk. His tail was wagging. He looked happy to see them. "Cooper," Maria said. "How did you get out there?" Cooper just wagged his tail harder. He followed Maria back into the shelter. He went right to his kennel and lay down like nothing had happened. He ate his breakfast like it was any normal day. But this wasn't the first time Cooper had done this. "This is the third time this month," Tom said, shaking his head. "And it's only February 15th. Maria remembered the other times. Each time, Cooper was gone in the morning. Each time, they found him sitting outside the front door, waiting to come back in. Each time, he looked happy and tired, like he had been on a long walk. "Maybe someone is letting him out," Maria said. "Who would do that?" Tom asked. "And why would they bring him back?" They looked at the security cameras from the night before. That's when they saw something amazing. Cooper was getting out of his kennel by himself. He was opening doors by himself. He was walking out into the night all alone. "This is impossible," Tom said, watching the video. "Dogs can't do this." But Cooper was doing it, and he was doing it every few nights. "Where does he go?" Maria wondered. "What does he do out there?" Tom fast-forwarded through the video. At 5:45 a.m., Cooper appeared on camera again. He was walking back to the shelter. He sat down in front of the door and waited. "He comes back on his own," Tom said. "He's not trying to run away. He's just visiting somewhere." Maria felt worried. What if someone complains? What if animal control finds out? What if they take Cooper away from us? Tom felt worried too. The shelter had rules. Dogs were not supposed to escape. If the county found out, they might shut down the shelter. Or worse, they might take Cooper to a different shelter. One that wasn't as nice. "We have to figure this out," Tom said. "We have to know where he goes and why." Maria looked at Cooper, in his kennel. He was lying down with his head on his paws. He looked peaceful. He looked like he was keeping a secret. "Cooper," she said softly, "what are you up to?" Cooper opened his chocolate-brown eyes and looked at her. For just a moment, Maria thought she saw something in those eyes. Something that looked like love and sadness and hope. "I'm going to stay here tonight," Tom decided. "I'm going to follow him. I'm going to find out where Cooper goes when he escapes." Maria nodded. "I'll stay too. We'll solve this mystery together." Tom looked at the calendar on his desk. It was February 16th, 2024. He had no idea that this night would change everything. He had no idea that Cooper's secret would break his heart and put it back together again. Cooper seemed to sense that something was different. He stood up in his kennel and wagged his tail. His eyes didn't look sad anymore. They looked excited. It was almost like Cooper wanted them to follow him. Tonight, Tom said, "We're going to find out what Cooper has been hiding." Cooper barked once, softly. Then he lay back down and closed his eyes. He was saving his energy for another long night ahead. Tom and Maria sat in the dark office with 2 cups of hot coffee. The clock on the wall said 2 a.m. They had been waiting for 15 minutes. Both of them were tired, but they were too excited to sleep. "What if he doesn't escape tonight?" Maria whispered. "He will," Tom said. "Look at him." They could see Cooper's kennel from the office window. Cooper was sitting up, wide awake. His ears were pointed forward. He was listening to something they couldn't hear. At exactly 2:15 a.m., Cooper stood up. "Here we go," Tom said quietly. They watched Cooper walk to the front of his kennel. He put his nose against the metal latch. Then he did something that made Tom and Maria gasp. Cooper pushed the latch up with his nose. He pushed it hard, using his whole head. The latch clicked open. "That's impossible," Maria breathed. Those latches are made so dogs can't open them. But Cooper had figured it out. Maybe it had taken him weeks to learn. Maybe he had practiced every night. Now he could open the latch like it was easy. Cooper pushed the kennel door open with his shoulder. He stepped out into the hallway. He looked left and right, like he was checking to make sure no one was watching. How does he know we're here? Tom wondered. Cooper walked down the hallway. His nails clicked softly on the floor. He moved like he had done this 100 times before. He knew exactly where to go. He stopped at the back door. This door was harder to open. It had a handle that you had to turn and pull at the same time. Cooper had figured this out too. He stood up on his back legs. He put his front paws on the doctor handle. He pushed down and pulled back at the same time. The door opened. He's smarter than most people, Maria said, amazed. Cooper walked outside. The night air was cold and crisp. Cooper's breath made little white clouds, but he didn't shiver. He looked happy to be outside. Behind him, the door swung shut, but it didn't lock. Cooper was too smart for that, too. He had learned to leave it open just a tiny bit, just enough so he could get back in later. Tom and Maria grabbed their coats. They hurried to the back door. Cooper was already walking across the parking lot. "We have to stay far behind him," Tom said. "If he sees us, he might get scared and run back." They followed Cooper at a distance. He walked to the street. The streetlights made his golden fur glow like he was made of sunshine. Cooper stopped at the curb. He looked left. He looked right. Then he looked left again, just like a person crossing the street. "He knows about traffic," Maria said. "Someone taught him that." Cooper crossed the street when no cars were coming. Tom and Maria followed, staying in the shadows. Cooper walked down Bradshaw Road. He turned onto Jackson Road. He knew exactly where he was going. He never stopped to sniff fire hydrants or trash cans like most dogs would. He was on a mission. They walked for almost 20 minutes. Cooper never got tired. His tail wagged the whole time. He looked excited, like he was going to see his best friend. Finally, Cooper turned into Hagen Community Park. The park was dark and quiet. The playground equipment looked like strange monsters in the moonlight. Cooper walked past the swings and slides. He walked past the picnic tables. He headed toward a group of big oak trees at the back of the park. "What's he doing?" Maria whispered. Then they saw it. Under the trees, someone had made a small camp. There was a blue tarp stretched between two tree branches. It made a little roof. Under the tarp, someone had spread out cardboard boxes to make a floor. There was a shopping cart next to the camp. It was full of bags and bottles and clothes. Everything was neat and organized, and there was a person sleeping under the tarp. Cooper walked right up to the camp. He lay down next to the sleeping person. He put his head on his paws and closed his eyes. The person stirred. Even in the darkness, Tom and Maria could see a hand reach out and pet Cooper's head. "Good boy," a voice said softly. "I knew you'd come." That voice was rough and tired, but it was gentle when it talked to Cooper. Cooper's tail wagged against the ground. He made a soft, happy sound. The person sat up a little. Tom and Maria could see it was a man. He was older, maybe 60 years old. His hair was gray and messy. His clothes looked old and worn. But when he petted Cooper, his face looked kind. "Did it keep eat? You have a good day, boy?" the man asked Cooper. "Did they feed you enough? Did anyone come to see you?" Cooper seemed to understand every word. He moved closer to the man. The man reached into a bag and pulled out something wrapped in paper. He unwrapped it carefully. It was half of a sandwich. "I saved this for you," the man said. peanut butter and jelly. I know it's your favorite." Cooper ate the sandwich gently. He didn't gulp it down like most hungry dogs would. He ate it slowly, like it was the best food in the world. Tom and Maria looked at each other. They were both thinking the same thing. This wasn't just any homeless person. This man knew Cooper. He knew what Cooper liked to eat. He had been waiting for Cooper to come. "This is Cooper's friend," Maria whispered. They watched for over an hour. The man talked to Cooper like they were old friends. He told Cooper about his day. He told him about the weather. He asked Cooper questions, and Cooper seemed to answer with his tail and his eyes. When the first light of dawn started to show in the sky, Cooper stood up. The man hugged him tight. "See you tomorrow night, boy," the man said. "I'll be right here waiting." Cooper licked the man's face once. Then he turned and started walking back toward the shelter. Tom and Maria followed him home. Cooper walked the same route backward. He crossed streets carefully. He never hurried. When he got to the shelter, he pushed through the back door he had left open. He walked to his kennel and lay down. By the time Maria and Tom got inside, Cooper looked like he had been sleeping all night. But his fur smelled like the outdoors. His paws were dirty from walking on pavement, and his eyes looked happy. "Who is that man?" Maria asked. "How does he know Cooper?" Tom shook his head. "I don't know, but Cooper isn't just visiting a stranger. That man loves Cooper, and Cooper loves him back." They stood looking at Cooper in his kennel. Cooper looked back at them with his chocolate-brown eyes. Now those eyes didn't look sad anymore. They looked like they were keeping the most important secret in the world. "We need to find out who that man is," Tom said. "We need to understand what's really happening here." Maria nodded. "Tomorrow we're going back to that park. We're going to talk to him." Cooper yawned and closed his eyes. He had walked 4 miles that night. He had spent 2 hours with his friend. Now he needed to rest, because tomorrow night he would do it all over again. Tom and Maria left Cooper to sleep, but they couldn't sleep themselves. They had too many questions. Who was the man in the park? How did he know Cooper? Why was Cooper risking everything to see him every night? And most importantly, what were they going to do about it? The sun was coming up over Sacramento. It was going to be a long day. But Tom and Maria knew one thing for sure. Cooper's secret was bigger than they had imagined, and it was about to change everything. The next morning, Tom could barely focus on his work. Every time he looked at Cooper, he saw the man in the park. He saw the gentle way the man had petted Cooper. He saw how Cooper's tail had wagged with pure joy. "We have to go back there," Tom told Maria during their lunch break. "We have to talk to him." "But what if we scare him away?" Maria worried. "What if he thinks we're going to get him in trouble?" Tom understood her fear. Many homeless people avoided anyone who looked official. They were afraid of police. They were afraid of getting kicked out of places. They just wanted to be left alone. "We'll be careful," Tom promised. "We'll show him we want to help." At 2 p.m., they drove to Hagen Community Park. The little camp was still there under the oak trees, but it was empty. The blue tarp flapped in the wind. The shopping cart sat quietly beside the trees. Tom and Maria walked around the park. A woman was pushing her baby in a stroller near the playground. "Excuse me," Maria said politely. "Do you come to this park often?" The woman smiled. "Every day. I live right across the street. I'm Mrs. Chen. We're from the animal shelter," Tom explained. "We're looking for information about a man who camps here sometimes." Mrs. Chen's face grew serious. "Is he in trouble?" "He's never bothered anyone." "No trouble," Maria said quickly. "We just want to help him." Mrs. Chen looked relieved. I've seen him for about 8 months now. He's very quiet, very polite. He keeps his area clean. He never leaves trash around. Does he have a dog with him? Tom asked. That's the strange thing, Mrs. Chen said. During the day, I sometimes see him with a beautiful golden dog. But at night, the dog isn't there. I always wondered where the dog went. Tom and Maria looked at each other. Now they were getting somewhere. WhenThey, man seems nice, Mrs. Chen continued. He helped me once when my stroller got stuck in the mud. He didn't want any money, just said he was happy to help. They thanked Mrs. Chen and walked to the grocery store on Jackson Road. The cashier was a young woman named Jenny. She had bright pink hair and a friendly smile. "Oh, you mean Frank," Jenny said when they described the man. "He comes in here every few days." "Frank?" Maria said. "That's his name?" "That's what he told me," Jenny said. "He's always very polite. Always says please and thank you. He buys dog food mostly. Sometimes bread and peanut butter. He pays with exact change from a big jar of coins." "Dog food?" Tom asked. "Yes, always the same brand. Good quality stuff too, not the cheap kind. He really cares about his dog." Jenny leaned closer and lowered her voice. "I always give him the store discount. He doesn't know, but I ring up his dog food as generic brand. Saves him a few dollars each time." Tom felt his throat get tight. This young woman was secretly helping Frank, just like Cooper was secretly visiting him. "Do you know anything else about him?" Maria asked. Jenny thought for a moment. "He's always clean, even though his clothes are old. He reads the newspaper sometimes while he's waiting in line. And he talks about his dog a lot. Calls him his boy." They left the grocery store with more questions than answers. Tom called the Sacramento Police Department and asked to speak to someone from the homeless outreach team. Officer David Kim met them at the park an hour later. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "We try to help the homeless population," Officer Kim explained. "But it's not easy. Many people don't trust police. They move around a lot to avoid being hassled." "Do you know Frank?" Tom asked. Officer Kim shook his head. "I know there are several camps in this area, but if he's not causing problems, he probably tries to stay invisible. That's how many homeless people survive." "What about services?" Maria asked. "Are there places he can get help?" "Sacramento has several programs," Officer Kim said. "The Veterans Center on Stockton Boulevard, the Salvation Army, St. John's Shelter. But people have to want help, and they have to trust the system." Officer Kim looked at the little camp under the trees. "Whoever lives here takes good care of the space. No litter, no damage to the park. Some people just need time to get back on their feet." Tom and Maria spent the rest of the afternoon at the park. At 4:30 p.m., they saw him coming. Frank pushed his shopping cart slowly across the grass. He was thin and moved carefully, like his back hurt. His gray hair was neat, like he had combed it with his fingers. His clothes were old, but clean. Tom and Maria hid behind a big tree and watched. Frank set up his camp like he had done it 1,000 times before. He spread the tarp perfectly. He arranged his belongings in neat piles. He pulled out a small camp chair and sat down. Then he did something that made Maria's heart skip. Frank reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. Even from far away, they could see it was a picture of a dog. Frank looked at the photo for a long time. He touched it gently with one finger. "That's Cooper," Maria whispered. Frank put the photo back in his jacket. Then he pulled out a can of dog food and a small bowl. He opened the can and put half the food in the bowl. He covered the rest with plastic wrap and put it back in his cart. He's getting ready for Cooper's visit, Tom realized. Frank also pulled out a sandwich. He unwrapped it and ate exactly half. He wrapped the other half carefully and put it in a bag. Everything Frank did was for Cooper. He saved half his food. He bought the best dog food he could afford. He waited patiently for his friend to arrive. At 6:01 p.m., Frank stood up and looked toward the shelter. It was still 4 hours before Cooper would come, but Frank was ready. He had been ready all day. Tom and Maria walked back to their car. They had learned so much, but they still had the biggest question of all. How do they know each other? Maria asked. Frank acts like Cooper is his dog. Tom started the car. Maybe Cooper was his dog. Maybe something happened and Frank had to give him up. But why would he give up a dog he loves so much? Tom didn't have an answer, but he knew they had to find out. Tomorrow I'm calling the shelter records, Tom said. I'm going to find out how Cooper came to us. Maybe that will tell us who Frank really is. They drove back to the shelter in silence. Cooper was in his kennel waiting for dinner. When he saw them, his tail wagged. His eyes looked bright and happy. He knows we saw his friend, Maria said. Look at him. He's not trying to hide anymore. Cooper did look different. He looked relieved, like he had been carrying a heavy secret, and now someone else knew about it. We're going to help you, Tom told Cooper. We're going to figure this out. Cooper barked once, softly. Then he lay down and put his head on his paws. Tonight, he would see Frank again. Tonight, they would share another sandwich and another quiet hour together. But Tom and Maria were going to find out the truth. They owed it to Cooper. They owed it to Frank. And they had a feeling that when they learned the whole story, it would break their hearts. Tom couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about Frank looking at Cooper's photograph. He kept thinking about the way Frank saved half his sandwich. He kept thinking about Cooper's happy eyes. At midnight, Tom gave up on sleep. He drove back to Hagen Park. He had to see them together. He had to understand their connection. Tom parked across the street and walked quietly to the oak trees. Frank was already awake, sitting in his little camp chair. He was looking at his watch. 15, Frank said to himself. Cooper will be here soon. Tom hid behind a tree. At exactly 2:30 a.m., Cooper appeared at the edge of the park. His golden fur caught the moonlight. He looked like an angel walking through the darkness. Cooper ran the last 20 feet to Frank. His tail wagged so hard his whole body wiggled. Frank stood up and opened his arms. There's my boy, Frank said, his voice full of love. There's my good boy. Cooper jumped up and put his paws on Frank's chest. Frank hugged him tight. They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other. Tom felt tears in his eyes. This wasn't just a man and a dog. This was a family reunion. Did you have a good day? Frank asked Cooper as they sat down together. Did Maria give you those treats you like? Did anyone come to visit you today? Tom's eyes went wide. Frank knew Maria's name. Frank knew about the treats Maria gave Cooper. Frank knew things about Cooper's life at the shelter. I know the people there are good to you, Frank continued. That lady with the dark hair, Maria, she has a kind heart. And that man, Tom, he really cares about all the animals. Tom almost gasped out loud. Frank knew his name too. But how? Frank reached into his bag and pulled out Cooper's dinner. Half a can of dog food in a clean bowl. He also pulled out half a sandwich wrapped in paper. Peanut butter and jelly tonight, Frank said. I know it's your favorite." Cooper ate slowly while Frank talked to him. Frank told Cooper about his day. He told him about the job interview he had that morning. "I applied to work at the hardware store on Florin Road," Frank said. "The manager seemed nice. He said he might have something for me next week." Frank petted Cooper's head while he talked. "I'm saving money every day, boy. Every penny I can find. I'm getting close to having enough for an apartment deposit." Cooper looked up at Frank with trusting eyes. "I know you're tired of waiting," Frank said. "I know you want to come home, but I have to make sure I can take proper care of you first. You deserve a real home with a yard and everything." Frank pulled out the photograph Tom had seen earlier. In the moonlight, Tom could see it clearly now. It was Cooper as a tiny puppy sitting next to a younger Frank. Frank was wearing a military uniform. "Remember when you were this small?" "Frank," asked Cooper, "you fit in my 2 hands. You were the cutest puppy at the base." Frank's voice got quiet and sad. "I never thought we'd be apart like this. When I brought you to the shelter, I promised I'd come back for you. I promised I'd get my life together and give you the home you deserve." Tom's heart was breaking. Now he understood. Cooper had been Frank's dog. Frank had to give Cooper to the shelter because he couldn't take care of him anymore. "I know 8 months feels like forever," Frank said. "But I kept my promise, didn't I? I never stopped visiting you. I never stopped loving you." Cooper seemed to understand every word. He moved closer to Frank and put his head on Frank's lap. Frank hugged Cooper tight. "Some people think I'm crazy for sleeping outside when there are shelters I could go to, but those places don't allow dogs, and I can't be too far from you. I have to know you're okay." Frank was homeless because he wanted to stay close to Cooper. He was living in the park so he could visit Cooper every night. "The Veterans Center is helping me," Frank told Cooper. "I'm getting better at dealing with the bad dreams. The counselor says having a purpose helps. And you're my purpose, boy. You always have been." Frank was a veteran. That explained the military uniform in the photo. That explained why he talked about the Veterans Center. "I applied for 3 jobs this week," Frank continued. "And I found a landlord who might rent to us. Mrs. Rodriguez said she doesn't mind dogs if they're well-behaved. And you're the best-behaved dog in the world." Frank pulled out a small notebook and showed it to Cooper. "Look, I've been keeping track of my savings. I have 840 Svensler now. I need $200 for first month's rent and deposit. I'm so close, boy. So close to bringing you home." He only needed $353 more. Frank had been saving every penny for 8 months to get Cooper back. Cooper seemed to sense Frank's sadness. He licked Frank's face gently. Frank laughed for the first time that night. "You always know how to make me feel better," Frank said. "Even when you were a puppy, you knew when I was having a bad day." Frank told Cooper about finding him as a puppy, how Cooper's mother had been astray on the military base in Afghanistan, how Frank had bottle-fed Cooper when he was too small to eat on his own. "You saved my life over there," Frank said quietly. "When the bad things happened, you were always there. You helped me sleep. You helped me not be afraid." Frank's voice got even quieter. "When I came home, things got hard. The nightmares, the panic attacks. I lost my job. I lost my apartment. But I never wanted to lose you." Frank started crying. "I thought I could get back on my feet quickly. I thought I'd only need a few weeks. I never imagined it would take this long." Cooper moved even closer to Frank. He seemed to be trying to comfort his best friend. "But I kept my promise," Frank said, wiping his eyes. "I visit you every night. I make sure you know you're not forgotten. I make sure you know you're loved." Frank looked at his watch. It was almost 5:01 a.m. Soon Cooper would have to go back to the shelter. "I have 2 more job interviews this week," Frank told Cooper, "and I'm selling aluminum cans every day. I'm going to get that $350. I'm going to get us a home." Cooper stood up and licked Frank's face one more time. It was time to go. "See you tomorrow night, son," Frank said, hugging Cooper tight. "I love you more than anything in this world." Cooper looked at Frank with his chocolate brown eyes. Those eyes said, "I love you too. I'll wait for you. I'll always wait for you." Then Cooper turned and walked back toward the shelter. Frank watched him go until he disappeared into the darkness. Frank packed up his small camp. He folded the tarp carefully. He organized his cart neatly. Everything he owned fit in that shopping cart, but he kept it clean and organized like it was a real home. Tom stayed hidden until Frank lay down to sleep. Then he walked quietly back to his car. His heart was full of sadness and love and hope, all at the same time. He understood everything now. Frank wasn't just some homeless man. He was Cooper's family. He was a veteran who had fallen on hard times but never gave up on his best friend. Cooper wasn't escaping from the shelter. He was visiting his dad. Tom drove back to the shelter as the sun came up. He had to tell Maria what he had learned. They had to help Frank and Cooper somehow, because what he had seen wasn't just beautiful. It was the most powerful love story he had ever witnessed. A love so strong that it could break through kennel latches. A love so strong that it could bring a dog home every single night. A love so strong that it never gave up, no matter how hard things got. Tom looked at Cooper sleeping peacefully in his kennel. Now he knew why Cooper's eyes had always looked sad. Cooper missed his dad every single day. But Cooper also looked hopeful, because he knew Frank would never stop trying to bring him home. And Tom was going to make sure that happened. Tom rushed into the shelter at 7 a.m. Maria was already there, feeding the dogs their breakfast. She looked up when Tom came running through the door. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Maria said. "I followed them again last night," Tom said, breathing hard. "Maria, you're not going to believe what I learned." Tom told Maria everything. About Frank being a veteran, about Cooper being Frank's dog from the beginning, about Frank sleeping outside just to be close to Cooper, about the $350 Frank still needed to bring Cooper home. Maria sat down hard in her chair. "Cooper is Frank's dog? He's been visiting his own dad this whole time?" "Not visiting," Tom said. "Taking care of him. Frank is taking care of Cooper. But Cooper is also taking care of Frank. They're taking care of each other." Maria looked at Cooper in his kennel. Cooper was watching them talk. His ears were pointed forward, like he knew they were talking about him. 8 months, Maria said quietly. "Frank brought Cooper here 8 months ago." Tom nodded. "Do you remember that day?" Maria closed her eyes and thought back. Then her face went pale. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I do remember. It was a Tuesday. In June. A man brought in a beautiful golden lab. He was crying. He said he couldn't take care of his dog anymore." The memory came flooding back to Maria. "He made me promise to take good care of Cooper. He said Cooper was the most important thing in his life. He said he'd be back as soon as he could." "What else do you remember?" Tom asked. He knew everything about Cooper. His favorite treats, his favorite toys. He told me Cooper was afraid of thunderstorms. He told me Cooper liked to sleep with a blanket. Maria felt terrible. "I thought he was just saying things. I thought he was making excuses. I see people give up their pets all the time. They always have stories." But Frank's story was true, Tom said. He never gave up on Cooper. He's been working every day to get him back. Tom pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the county records office. I need to get Frank's full name and information from when he brought Cooper in." While Tom made phone calls, Maria went to Cooper's kennel. She knelt down and looked at Cooper through the chain-link fence. "I'm so sorry," she told Cooper. "I didn't understand. You weren't trying to escape. You were just going home to visit your dad." Cooper came to the front of his kennel. He put his nose through the fence and licked Maria's fingers. "You've been so brave," Maria said, her voice shaking. "Missing your dad every day, but never giving up hope." Tom got off the phone. "Frank Morrison, Army medic. 2 tours in Afghanistan between 2019 and 2022. He brought Cooper to us on June 15, 2023. Tom kept reading from his notes. Frank listed his address as 1247 Oak Street, apartment 12. But when I called that number, it's been disconnected. The apartment complex says he moved out in May of last year. Right before he brought Cooper to us, Maria realized. Tom made another call to the Sacramento Veterans Administration. A counselor named Patricia Williams knew Frank well. "Frank comes to our PTSD support group twice a week," Patricia explained over the phone. "He's been working very hard to get his life back together. He talks about his dog all the time." "What can you tell us about his situation?" Tom asked. Frank lost his job as a paramedic after having panic attacks during emergency calls, Patricia said. "It's common for veterans with PTSD. The stress triggers memories from combat." Patricia's voice was kind but sad. Frank couldn't afford his rent without his job. He had to choose between keeping his apartment or keeping his dog. He chose to make sure his dog was safe. Tom felt his heart break all over again. Frank had given up his home to make sure Cooper was taken care of. "Is he getting help?" Maria asked. "Frank is one of our most dedicated participants," Patricia said. "He never misses a session. He's been learning coping strategies for his PTSD. He's also been working with our job counselor." Patricia paused. "Frank has applied for dozens of jobs. He's had several interviews. But it's hard for veterans with PTSD to find steady work. Employers don't always understand." "What about housing?" Tom asked. "That's the biggest challenge," Patricia admitted. "Most affordable housing has long waiting lists, and many landlords won't rent to people without steady income or good credit." Tom felt frustrated. Frank was doing everything right. He was getting treatment. He was looking for work. He was saving money. But the system was making it nearly impossible for him to get back on his feet. "There's something else you should know," Patricia said. "Frank could have gone to homeless shelters. We've offered to help him get into programs, but he refuses to go anywhere that doesn't allow dogs. He's staying homeless to be near Cooper," Maria said. "Frank told me his dog saved his life in Afghanistan," Patricia continued. "Cooper helped him through the worst parts of his PTSD. Frank would rather sleep outside than be separated from Cooper completely." After Tom hung up, he and Maria sat in silence for a long time. They both looked at Cooper, who was lying quietly in his kennel with his head on his paws. "Frank has been fighting for 8 months to get Cooper back," Tom said. "And Cooper has been escaping every night to make sure Frank knows he's not forgotten." Maria wiped tears from her eyes. "What kind of love does that? What kind of loyalty?" "The kind that doesn't give up," Tom said, "no matter how hard things get." Tom looked at Cooper's adoption file. Frank had paid the surrender fee even though he barely had any money. He had filled out all the paperwork carefully. He had answered every question about Cooper's health and behavior. At the bottom of the form, Frank had written a note. Please take good care of my boy. I will come back for him as soon as I can. He is the best dog in the world and deserves a family who will love him as much as I do." He never meant to give Cooper up forever, Maria realized. He was just keeping Cooper safe until he could provide for him again. Tom made a decision. "We have to help them. Frank only needs $353 more for an apartment deposit. We have to find a way to help him get that money." "But the shelter has rules," Maria said. "We're not supposed to get involved in people's personal situations." "This isn't just anyone's personal situation," Tom said firmly. "This is Cooper's situation. And Cooper is our responsibility." Tom looked at Cooper one more time. Cooper was watching them with his intelligent brown eyes, those eyes that had seen war and peace, separation and hope. "Frank kept his promise," Tom said. "He visits Cooper every single night. He's never missed a night in 8 months. Now it's our turn to keep a promise." "What promise?" Maria asked. "The promise we make to every animal that comes through our doors," Tom said, "that will help them find their way home." Cooper's tail wagged once, softly, like he understood that help was finally coming. Frank Morrison was about to learn that he wasn't fighting alone anymore, and Cooper was about to learn that sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting for. But first, Tom and Maria had to figure out how to raise $353 without breaking any rules or getting themselves in trouble. They had less than 24 hours before Cooper would visit Frank again. And this time, Tom and Maria wanted to have good news to share. Tom paced back and forth in the shelter office. His mind was racing with ideas. How could they help Frank get the money he needed? How could they do it quickly? And most importantly, how could they do it without getting fired? "We could start a fundraiser," Maria suggested. "Ask people to donate money for Frank." Tom shook his head. "The shelter board wouldn't allow it. We're not supposed to give money to people who surrender animals. It could set a bad example." "But this is different," Maria argued. "Frank didn't abandon Cooper. He's been visiting him every night for 8 months. "I know that," Tom said. "But the board doesn't know that. They just see the rules." Maria looked at Cooper in his kennel. Cooper was watching them with hope in his eyes, like he knew they were trying to help his dad. "What if we don't tell the board?" Maria asked quietly. Tom stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" "What if we help Frank ourselves? With our own money?" Tom sat down and did quick math in his head. He made $8 an hour at the shelter. Maria made $16 an hour. Between them, they might have $100 in savings. "We don't have enough," Tom said sadly. "Even if we gave Frank everything we have, it wouldn't be enough." They sat in discouraged silence for a few minutes. Then Maria had an idea. "What about the other staff members? Jenny from the night shift loves Cooper. And David from maintenance always brings Cooper special treats." Tom's eyes lit up. "You're right. Everyone here loves Cooper. If they knew the real story, they'd want to help. But we have to be careful," Maria warned. "If word gets back to the board that we're collecting money for someone who surrendered an animal, we'll be very careful," Tom promised. "We'll only tell people we trust completely." Tom called Jenny first. She worked the night shift and had always been especially kind to Cooper. "You mean Cooper has been escaping to visit his owner?" Jenny said when Tom explained everything. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Jenny promised to contribute $50 from her next paycheck. She also promised to ask her boyfriend, Mike, who worked at the county animal hospital. Next, Tom called. David from maintenance? David was a big, tough-looking man, but he had the softest heart for animals. "That dog has been missing his dad this whole time?" David said, his voice getting thick with emotion. "Count me in for $75, and I'll ask my wife too." By lunchtime, Tom and Maria had quietly talked to 8 shelter employees. Everyone wanted to help. No one hesitated to give money. Dr. Sarah Kim, the shelter veterinarian, contributed $100. "Cooper is one of the sweetest dogs I've ever treated," she said. "If his owner has been visiting him every night, then that's true love." The total was growing: $50 from Jenny, $75 from David, $100 from Dr. Kim, $40 from receptionist Carol, $30 from volunteer coordinator Lisa. "We're up to $295, Maria calculated. "We're getting close." But they still needed $58 more, and time was running out. At 3 p.m., Tom had an idea. He called his sister Susan, who managed an apartment complex across town. "I need a favor," Tom told her. "I need you to meet someone very special." Tom explained Frank's situation. He told Susan about Frank's military service, his PTSD, his dedication to getting Cooper back. "Bring him to see me," Susan said immediately. "I have a small 1-bedroom unit that's been empty for 2 months. It's not fancy, but it's clean and safe." "Susan, he doesn't have all the money yet," Tom warned. "How much does he have?" Susan asked. $847, and we've raised $295 more, so $1,142 total. Susan was quiet for a moment. "The rent is $750 a month. I usually require first month plus $450 deposit. But for a veteran who's been living outside just to stay close to his dog, I'll waive the deposit." Tom almost dropped the phone. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Susan said. "Bring him by tonight. If he's half as good a man as you say he is, he can move in tomorrow." Tom hung up and looked at Maria with tears in his eyes. "We did it. Susan will waive the deposit. Frank has enough money to get the apartment." Maria started crying too. Cooper can go home. Cooper can finally go home. They still had one more problem. How were they going to approach Frank without scaring him? How could they explain that they knew about his nightly visits? "We have to be honest," Tom decided. "We have to tell him we followed Cooper. We have to tell him we know the whole story." At 6 p.m., Tom and Maria drove to Hagen Park. Frank was setting up his small camp under the oak trees. When he saw them coming, he looked terrified. "Is something wrong with Cooper?" Frank asked immediately. "Is he sick? Is he hurt?" "Cooper is fine," Tom said quickly. "We're here because we want to help you." Frank looked confused and scared. "Help me with what?" "We know," Maria said gently. "We know you've been visiting Cooper every night. We know he's your dog." Frank's face went white. He sat down hard on his camp chair. "Are you going to call the police? Are you going to make me stop seeing him?" "No," Tom said firmly. "We're going to help you bring him home." Tom and Maria sat down on the ground next to Frank. They told him about following Cooper. They told him about watching their beautiful reunions every night. They told him about the money they had raised. "We know you only need $353 more," Tom said. "But we found you an apartment that you can afford right now, today, with the money you already have." Frank stared at them like they were speaking a foreign language. "I don't understand. Why would you help me?" "Because love like yours doesn't come along very often," Maria said. "Because Cooper has been heartbroken without you. Because you never gave up, even when everything went wrong." Tom pulled out the address Susan had given him. "My sister manages this apartment complex. She has a 1-bedroom unit available. $750 a month, no deposit required. It allows dogs." Frank took the paper with shaking hands. This is real? This isn't some kind of joke? It's real, Maria promised. You can see the apartment tonight. If you like it, you can move in tomorrow. And you can take Cooper home with you. Frank started crying. He put his face in his hands and sobbed. 8 months of worry and hope and determination came pouring out. I kept my promise, Frank said through his tears. I told Cooper I'd come back for him. I kept my promise. Yes, you did, Tom said, putting his hand on Frank's shoulder. You're the most loyal person we've ever met. Frank looked up at them with tears streaming down his face. How do I thank you? How do I ever repay you for this? You don't, Maria said. You just love Cooper and give him the happy life he deserves. Frank wiped his eyes and stood up. Can we go see the apartment now? Can we go right now? Tom smiled. Let's go bring Cooper home. As they walked to Tom's car, Frank kept looking back at his camp under the trees. He had lived there for 8 months, sleeping on cardboard, saving every penny for this moment. Are you going to miss it? Maria asked. Frank shook his head. This was never home. Home is wherever Cooper is. Tonight, for the first time in 8 months, Frank and Cooper would sleep under the same roof. Tonight, a family would be reunited. And tomorrow, Cooper wouldn't have to escape from the shelter anymore, because he would already be home. Frank stood outside the small apartment building on Elm Street, holding the keys in his trembling hands. Tom's sister Susan had met them an hour ago and shown Frank the one-bedroom unit. It had a tiny kitchen, a living room with big windows, and most importantly, a small fenced backyard perfect for a dog. This is really mine? Frank had asked Susan 3 times. It's really yours, Susan had answered each time. Move in whenever you're ready. Now, Frank, Tom, and Maria were standing outside the shelter at 10:00 p.m. Cooper was inside, sleeping peacefully, with no idea that his life was about to change forever. Are you ready? Tom asked Frank. Frank took a deep breath. I've been ready for 8 months. They walked into the shelter together. Cooper was lying in his kennel with his head on his paws. When he saw Frank, he jumped up so fast he almost hit his head on the kennel ceiling. Cooper started whining and spinning in circles. His tail wagged so hard his whole body shook. He pressed his nose through the chain-link fence, trying to get as close to Frank as possible. Hey, boy, Frank said softly, kneeling down at the kennel door. Guess what? We're going home. We're finally going home. Maria unlocked Cooper's kennel with shaking hands. The moment the door opened, Cooper launched himself into Frank's arms. Frank caught him and held him tight, both of them trembling with joy. We did it, Cooper, Frank whispered into Cooper's fur. We never gave up, and we did it. Cooper was licking Frank's face and whimpering with happiness. He seemed to understand that this time was different. This time, Frank wasn't leaving without him. Tom handed Frank the adoption papers. These are already filled out. Cooper is officially yours again. Frank signed the papers with tears in his eyes. After 8 months, Cooper Morrison was going home with Frank Morrison. There's one more thing, Maria said. She handed Frank a bag full of Cooper's favorite toys, his blanket, and a week's worth of dog food. From all of us at the shelter. Frank tried to thank them, but he couldn't speak. He just hugged Cooper tighter and nodded. They walked out of the shelter together. Cooper stayed glued to Frank's side, like he was afraid Frank might disappear. When they got to Tom's car, Cooper jumped into the back seat and immediately curled up next to Frank. He knows, Tom said, watching them in the rearview mirror. He knows this is it. They drove to the apartment in happy silence. Frank kept one hand on Cooper's head the whole time. Cooper kept his eyes fixed on Frank's face, like he was memorizing every detail. At the apartment, Frank unlocked the door. With his new keys, Cooper walked inside and immediately started exploring. He sniffed every corner, every room, every inch of his new home. "What do you think, boy?" Frank asked. "Do you like it?" Cooper's answer was to run to Frank and jump up, putting his paws on Frank's chest. Frank hugged him tight. "This is our home," Frank said. "Our real home. No more kennels. No more camping in the park. Just you and me, together." Tom and Maria left them alone to enjoy their first night together. As they drove away, they could see Frank and Cooper through the living room window, sitting on the floor together, just holding each other. The next morning, Tom got a phone call that changed everything. "Is this Tom Rodriguez from the Sacramento County Animal Shelter?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is Tom. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a reporter for Channel 10 News. I heard an amazing story about a dog who escaped every night to visit his homeless owner. Is this true?" Tom's heart stopped. How had the news found out? "Where did you hear this story?" Tom asked carefully. "My mother lives across from Hagen Park," Sarah explained. "She told me about seeing a man with a dog and how the dog would disappear at night. When I started asking questions, I heard about what you and your staff did to help them reunite." Tom realized that Mrs. Chen, the woman they had talked to at the park, was this reporter's mother. "I'd like to do a story about this," Sarah continued. "This isn't about homelessness or animal control problems. This is about love, loyalty, and community coming together to help." Tom thought quickly. The story was already out there. Maybe sharing it widely could help other people in Frank's situation. "Let me talk to Frank first," Tom said. "If he's comfortable with it, then yes." Tom called Frank immediately. Frank was at his apartment, making breakfast for himself and Cooper. "A news story," Frank said. "About me and Cooper?" "Only if you want to," Tom assured him. "But Sarah seems to want to tell the story the right way. About love and loyalty, not about being homeless." Frank was quiet for a moment. "If our story can help other veterans or other animals, then yes. Cooper and I want to help." The news story aired that evening. Sarah Chen had done exactly what she promised. She focused on the incredible bond between Frank and Cooper. She talked about Frank's military service and his struggle with PTSD. She talked about Cooper's nightly escapes and Frank's dedication to visiting him. But most importantly, she talked about how the community came together to help. The story showed Tom and Maria at the shelter, talking about how much they loved Cooper. It showed Susan at the apartment complex, explaining why she waived the deposit. It showed Frank and Cooper in their new home, finally together. "This isn't just a story about a man and his dog," Sarah said at the end of the news report. "This is a story about what happens when love refuses to give up." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Channel 10 phone lines lit up with people wanting to help. Donations started pouring in. Not just money, but offers of furniture, job leads, and support for other veterans. Frank's phone rang all the next day. 3 different companies called offering him job interviews. A furniture store offered to donate a couch and bed. A veterinary clinic offered free care for Cooper for a year. "I can't believe this," Frank told Tom over the phone. "People I've never met want to help me." But the best call came from the Sacramento Veterans Administration. "Frank," his counselor Patricia Williams said, "I just got off the phone with the VA regional office. Because of your story, they've approved emergency housing assistance for 3 other homeless veterans in our program." Frank started crying. Our story helped other people? Your story showed people that veterans need support, not judgment, Patricia explained. That love and loyalty matter more than having a lot of money. You and Cooper have given hope to so many people. That weekend, Frank started his new job at Morrison Hardware Store. The owner, Mr. Peterson, was a Vietnam veteran who understood what Frank had been through. Having Cooper with you will help customers feel comfortable, Mr. Peterson said. Dogs make everything better. Cooper became the unofficial greeter at the hardware store. He would sit by the front door, wagging his tail at everyone who came in. Children would ask their parents if they could pet the famous dog from TV. Frank worked hard and loved his new job. But the best part was that Cooper could come with him every day. They were never apart anymore. 1 month after moving into the apartment, Frank and Tom met for coffee. Cooper lay at Frank's feet, wearing a brand new collar with his name and Frank's phone number. I don't know how to thank you, Frank said for the 100th time. You don't need to thank me, Tom replied. You and Cooper taught all of us something important. What's that? Tom looked at Cooper, who was sleeping peacefully next to his dad. That real love never gives up, that families stick together no matter what, and that sometimes, when things seem impossible, all you need is one person to believe in you. Frank reached down and petted Cooper's head. Cooper opened one eye, saw his dad was there, and went back to sleep. Cooper never stopped believing in me, Frank said, even when I stopped believing in myself. And now you have a whole community believing in you, Tom said. Frank smiled. It was the first completely happy smile Tom had ever seen on his face. Cooper stirred in his sleep and moved closer to Frank's feet. He was home. He was safe. He was loved. And he would never have to escape to find his family again. Because his family was finally, truly, forever together. 3 weeks had passed since Cooper went home with Frank. Every morning, Frank would wake up and look at Cooper sleeping on the dog bed next to his own bed. Every morning, Frank would smile and whisper, "Good morning, son." Cooper had settled into their new life perfectly. He loved going to work at the hardware store. He loved their evening walks around the neighborhood. Most of all, he loved never having to wonder where his dad was. But Frank didn't know that his story had traveled much further than Sacramento. On a Tuesday morning in March, Frank was organizing screws and bolts at the hardware store when his phone rang. The number showed a long-distance area code he didn't recognize. "Hello?" Frank answered. "Is this Frank Morrison?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is Frank." "Mr. Morrison, my name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a producer for Good Morning America in New York. We'd like to invite you and Cooper to be guests on our show." Frank almost dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, what?" "We saw the news story about you and Cooper on Channel 10 in Sacramento. Our viewers would love to hear your story. We'd like to fly you both to New York for an interview." Frank looked down at Cooper, who was lying in his favorite sunny spot by the store window. Cooper's tail was wagging, even though he was half asleep. "You want Cooper and me on national television?" Frank asked. "Yes, sir. Your story has touched millions of people across the country. We've received hundreds of emails asking us to cover it." Frank felt overwhelmed. 3 weeks ago, he was sleeping in a park. Now, someone wanted him on national TV. "Can I think about it?" Frank asked. "Of course. Take your time. My number is..." Frank wrote down the producer's information with shaking hands. When he hung up, Mr. Peterson was standing behind him with a huge smile. "Frank, did I just hear what I think I heard?" Mr. Peterson asked. "They want me and Cooper on Good Morning America," Frank said, still not believing it. Mr. Peterson clapped Frank on the shoulder. "That's incredible! You're going to be famous!" "I don't want to be famous," Frank said quickly. "I just wanted my dog back." "But think about all the good this could do," Mr. Peterson said gently. "Think about all the homeless veterans who could get help. Think about all the shelter animals who might find homes." That evening, Frank called Tom and Maria to ask for their advice. They met at Frank's apartment for dinner. Frank had cooked spaghetti, and Cooper had supervised from his spot on the kitchen floor. "What do you think I should do?" Frank asked as they ate. Tom and Maria looked at each other. They had talked about this on the drive over. "I think you should do it," Maria said, "but only if you feel comfortable." "Your story gives people hope," Tom added. "It shows that good things can happen even when everything seems impossible." Cooper wandered over and put his head on Frank's lap. Frank petted him automatically. "What if people judge me?" Frank worried. "What if they think I was a bad person for being homeless?" "Frank," Maria said firmly, "you're one of the best people we've ever met. You sacrificed everything to make sure Cooper was safe. You never gave up. You kept every promise you made." Tom nodded. "And look at you now. You have a job, a home, and Cooper. You're proof that people can overcome anything." Frank looked at Cooper. "What do you think, boy? Want to go to New York?" Cooper's tail wagged harder, like he understood they were talking about an adventure. "Okay," Frank decided. "I'll call them back tomorrow." The next morning, Frank called Jennifer Walsh back and agreed to the interview. Within hours, everything started moving very fast. The show would pay for Frank and Cooper to fly to New York. They would stay in a nice hotel for 2 nights. Cooper would be welcome everywhere they went. "We'll send a car to pick you up on Friday," Jennifer explained. "The interview will be Saturday morning. Live on the show." Frank had never been on an airplane before. He had never stayed in a hotel. He had never been to New York City. But Cooper would be with him, so everything would be okay. Friday morning came quickly. Frank put on his best shirt and pants. Cooper wore his new collar and leash. A black car picked them up at Frank's apartment. At the Sacramento airport, people recognized them from the local news story. Children asked if they could pet Cooper. Adults shook Frank's hand and thanked him for his service. On the airplane, Cooper sat in the seat next to Frank like a regular passenger. The flight attendants made a fuss over him. Other passengers took pictures. "You're famous, boy," Frank whispered to Cooper as they flew over the mountains. When they landed in New York, another car was waiting for them. The driver took them to a beautiful hotel in Manhattan. Cooper had never seen buildings so tall or streets so busy. In their hotel room, Frank and Cooper stood at the window looking out at the city lights. "We've come a long way from that park in Sacramento," Frank said. Cooper pressed against Frank's side. He didn't care about the fancy hotel or the big city. He was just happy to be with his dad. Saturday morning, they went to the television studio. Frank was nervous, but Cooper seemed excited by all the new sounds and smells. Jennifer Walsh met them in the green room. She was a kind woman with a warm smile. "Frank, I want you to know that this interview will focus on the positive parts of your story," she assured him. "We want people to understand the bond between you and Cooper. We want them to see what love and loyalty look like." When it was time for the interview, Frank and Cooper walked onto the TV set together. There were bright lights and cameras everywhere. But Cooper wasn't scared. He sat calmly next to Frank's chair. The host, Michael Strawn, was friendly and kind. He asked Frank about his time in Afghanistan. He asked about adopting Cooper as a puppy. He asked about the hard times when Frank lost his job and his apartment. "What kept you going?" Michael asked. "What made you keep fighting?" Frank looked at Cooper. This guy right here. I made him a promise that I would always take care of him. Even when I couldn't take care of myself, I couldn't break that promise. And Cooper kept visiting you every night at the park? Every single night for 8 months, Frank said, his voice full of love. Rain or shine, Cooper would find a way to escape the shelter and come see me. He never gave up on me. Michael leaned forward. What do you want people to know about your story? Frank thought for a moment. I want people to know that love doesn't give up, whether it's love for your family, your pet, or your country. And I want people to know that sometimes, when you think you're all alone, there are angels around you ready to help. Angels like Tom and Maria at the shelter, and like my sister Susan, who gave me an apartment, and like Mr. Peterson, who gave me a job, and like all the people who donated money so Cooper and I could be together again. As the interview ended, Cooper did something that made everyone in the studio gasp. He stood up, walked over to Michael Strahan, and shook hands with him. The audience laughed and clapped. Michael was delighted. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael said to the camera, "Cooper Morrison, the dog who never gave up on love." After the show, Frank and Cooper walked through Times Square. People stopped them on the street. They had seen the EEE interview and wanted to meet Cooper. A little girl tugged on her mother's coat. "Mommy, that's the famous dog, the one who loved his daddy so much he escaped every night." The little girl's mother smiled at Frank. "Thank you for showing us what real love looks like." That night, in their hotel room, Frank called Tom and Maria. "How did it go?" Maria asked excitedly. "Better than I ever imagined," Frank said. "Cooper was perfect. He even shook hands with the host." Tom laughed. "Of course he did. Cooper always knows how to charm people." "Frank," Maria said, "we're so proud of you. You're helping people understand that everyone deserves a second chance." After Frank hung up, he sat on the hotel bed with Cooper. Cooper curled up next to him, just like he had done countless nights in the park. "You know what, boy?" Frank said, scratching Cooper behind the ears. "I think our story is just beginning." Cooper's tail wagged once, and then he fell asleep with his head on Frank's lap. Outside, the city of New York sparkled with millions of lights. But inside their hotel room, Frank and Cooper had everything they needed. They had each other, and that was enough to light up the whole world. When Frank and Cooper returned to Sacramento on Sunday evening, their lives had changed forever. The Good Morning America interview had been seen by 12 million people across the country. Frank's phone was buzzing with messages he couldn't even count. But all Frank wanted to do was go home to their little apartment on Elm Street. "Come on, boy," Frank said to Cooper as they walked up the stairs to their front door. "Let's go home." Cooper's tail wagged as Frank turned the key in the lock. Their small apartment felt like a palace after the busy noise of New York City. Cooper immediately went to his food bowl and took a long drink of water. Then he grabbed his favorite tennis ball and brought it to Frank. "You want to play?" Frank laughed. "After all that traveling?" Cooper dropped the ball at Frank's feet and barked once. Frank threw the ball across the living room, and Cooper chased it happily. Some things never changed. The next morning, Frank went back to work at Morrison Hardware Store. As soon as he walked through the door with Cooper, the phone started ringing. "Morrison Hardware, this is Bob Peterson," Mr. Peterson answered. "Is this the store where Frank Morrison works? The man with the famous dog?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, it is," Mr. Peterson said, smiling at Frank. "I saw them on Good Morning America yesterday. I live in Ohio, but I wanted to order something from your store just to support Frank." Mr. Peterson looked amazed. You want to buy something from our store in California because you saw Frank on TV? Absolutely. That man and his dog touched my heart. By noon, the hardware store had received orders from 15 different states. People were buying hammers and screwdrivers and garden tools just because they wanted to support Frank. "Frank," Mr. Peterson said during a lunch break, "I've never seen anything like this. People from all over the country want to help you." But the phone calls weren't just about buying things, they were about sharing stories. A woman from Texas called to tell Frank that his story had inspired her to adopt a dog from her local shelter. A man from Maine said he was going to volunteer at a veterans center because of Frank's interview. The most important call came Tuesday afternoon. It was from Senator Barbara Boxer's office in Washington, D.C. "Mr. Morrison," the caller said, "Senator Boxer was very moved by your story. She would like to invite you to testify before Congress about the need for better support for homeless veterans." Frank sat down hard in his chair. "Testify before Congress? Me?" "Yes, sir. Your story shows how important it is to help veterans transition back to civilian life. Would you be willing to come to Washington and share your experience?" Frank looked at Cooper, who was greeting customers by the front door. "Can Cooper come with me?" "Of course." Senator Boxer specifically requested that Cooper be there too. Frank said yes. If his story could help other veterans get the support they needed, then he would tell it as many times as necessary. That weekend, Tom and Maria came over for dinner again. Frank had gotten better at cooking, and Cooper had gotten better at begging for table scraps. "So, you're going to Washington, D.C. next month?" Maria asked. "Congress wants to hear about what it's like to be a homeless veteran," Frank explained. "They want to know how to help people like me." Tom shook his head in amazement. "6 months ago, you were sleeping in a park. Now you're going to testify before Congress." "It doesn't feel real," Frank admitted. "Sometimes I wake up and think I'm going to be back under those oak trees." "But you're not," Maria said firmly. "You're here, in your own home, with Cooper, and you're helping people all over the country." After dinner, they sat in Frank's living room. Cooper was stretched out on the floor with his head on Frank's feet. The apartment was decorated now with gifts people had sent after seeing the TV interview. There were pictures, blankets, and even a painting of Frank and Cooper that a little girl in Oregon had made. "Frank," Tom said quietly, "there's something Maria and I want to tell you." Frank looked at his friends. "What is it?" "We've started a program at the shelter," Maria explained. "It's called Cooper's Promise. We help pet owners who are going through hard times keep their animals instead of surrendering them. We provide temporary foster care, help with veterinary bills, and connect people with resources," Tom added. "So families don't have to be separated like you and Cooper were?" Frank felt tears in his eyes. "You named it after Cooper?" "Cooper showed us that the bond between people and their pets is sacred," Maria said. "We never want another family to go through what you two went through." Frank reached down and petted Cooper's head. Cooper opened his eyes and looked up at his dad with pure love. "How many families have you helped so far?" Frank asked. 12 in the past month," Tom said. "And the number keeps growing. People donate money specifically for Cooper's Promise because they know it helps keep families together." Frank stood up and hugged both Tom and Maria. "Thank you for seeing what Cooper and I really meant to each other. Thank you for understanding that we were always a family." A month later, Frank and Cooper flew to Washington, D.C. Frank wore his best suit, and Cooper wore a special red, white, and blue collar that a veteran in Colorado had sent him. In the hearing room, Frank sat at a long table with a microphone in front of him. Cooper lay quietly at his feet. Senators and representatives filled the room, ready to listen to his story. "Mr. Morrison," Senator Boxer said, "please tell us about your experience as a homeless veteran." Frank took a deep breath and began to speak. He told them about serving in Afghanistan. He told them about adopting Cooper as a puppy. He told them about struggling with PTSD and losing his job. "When I had to surrender Cooper to the animal shelter, it was the hardest thing I had ever done," Frank said, his voice strong and clear. "But I knew I couldn't take proper care of him." Frank explained how he had lived in the park for 8 months, saving every penny to get Cooper back. He told them about Cooper's nightly escapes to visit him. "This dog never gave up on me," Frank said, looking down at Cooper. "Even when I had given up on myself, Cooper kept faith that we would be together again." Senator Boxer leaned forward. "What would have helped you during those 8 months?" "Job training that worked with my PTSD symptoms," Frank said immediately. "Housing assistance that allowed pets, and counseling that understood the bond between veterans and their service animals." "Cooper isn't officially a service dog, is he?" another senator asked. "No, sir, but he saved my life just the same. He gave me a reason to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless." Frank talked for an hour about the challenges homeless veterans face. He talked about the shame and fear that keeps many veterans from asking for help. Most importantly, he talked about the healing power of love and loyalty. When Frank finished speaking, the entire room was quiet. Then Senator Boxer started clapping. Soon everyone was applauding Frank and Cooper. "Mr. Morrison," Senator Boxer said, "your testimony will help us write better laws to support homeless veterans. Thank you for your courage in sharing your story." After the hearing, Frank and Cooper walked out of the Capitol building together. Reporters wanted to interview them, but Frank politely said no. He had said everything he came to say. That evening, in their hotel room, Frank called Mr. Peterson to check on the hardware store. "How did it go?" Mr. Peterson asked. "I think we helped some people understand," Frank said. "I think Cooper and I made a difference." "Frank, you've been making a difference since the day you refused to give up on that dog." The next morning, Frank and Cooper flew home to Sacramento. As their plane descended, Frank could see the city spread out below them. Somewhere down there was Hagen Park, where they had spent so many cold nights together. Somewhere down there was the animal shelter, where Cooper had waited patiently for 8 months. But most importantly, somewhere down there was their little apartment on Elm Street, their home. When they walked through their front door, Cooper immediately went to his favorite spot by the window and lay down with a contented sigh. Frank sat down on the couch and looked around their living room. On the wall was the photo from Afghanistan showing Frank in his uniform with tiny puppy Cooper. Next to it was a newer photo of them at the hardware store, both of them smiling. Frank thought about everything that had happened. The dark months in the park, the hope that kept him going, the people who had helped them, the joy of being reunited. "We made it, Cooper," Frank said softly. "We really made it." Cooper opened one eye, saw his dad sitting peacefully on their couch, in their home, and went back to sleep. They were exactly where they belonged. Together, safe, and home at last. 1 year later, Frank stood in the same spot where his small camp used to be under the oak trees in Hagen Park. But everything was different now. He was wearing clean clothes and had gained healthy weight. His eyes no longer looked tired and scared. Most importantly, Cooper was walking beside him on a bright red leash, not escaping from a shelter to find him. It was June 15th, 2024. Exactly 1 year since Frank had brought Cooper to the Sacramento County Animal Shelter with tears in his eyes and a promise to come back. "This is where we used to sleep, boy," Frank said to Cooper, pointing to the ground under the trees. "Remember?" Cooper sniffed the spot and wagged his tail. He remembered, but he didn't look sad. He looked proud. They had survived the hardest time of their lives right here. Frank had asked Tom and Maria to meet him at the park. He wanted to do something special on this anniversary day. When Tom and Maria arrived, they brought a surprise with them. Following behind them was a whole group of people. Mr. Peterson from the hardware store, Patricia Williams from the Veterans Center, Susan, who had given Frank his apartment, Officer David Kim from the police, Dr. Sarah Kim from the shelter, even Mrs. Chen from across the street. "What's all this?" Frank asked, smiling. "We wanted to celebrate with you," Maria said. "Today marks 1 year since you brought Cooper to us. 1 year since you started the journey that brought you both home." Tom carried a small wooden sign. He handed it to Frank. The sign read, "Cooper's Corner, where love never gives up." "The city approved it," Tom explained. "This spot is now officially Cooper's Corner, a reminder that families belong together." Frank felt tears in his eyes. The cute place where he had felt most hopeless was now a symbol of hope. "There's more," Patricia Williams said. She pulled out an official-looking document. The Cooper-Morrison Act was signed into law last week. It provides housing assistance and job training specifically for homeless veterans with pets. Frank stared at the paper. "They named a law after Cooper?" "After both of you," Patricia corrected. "Your testimony before Congress made this happen. Hundreds of veterans across the country will be able to keep their pets because of your story." Dr. Kim stepped forward. "And Cooper's promise has helped 43 families in the past year. 43 pets got to stay with their families instead of being surrendered." Cooper seemed to understand that everyone was talking about him. He sat up straight and tall, his golden fur shining in the afternoon sun. Mrs. Chen walked over to Frank. "I have something for you, too." She handed him a photo album. "I've been taking pictures of you and Cooper in the park at night for the past year. I thought you might want them." Frank opened the album. The first picture showed him and Cooper sleeping under the tarp on a cold night last winter. Cooper was curled up against Frank's side, keeping him warm. The last picture showed them this morning, walking through the park together, both looking healthy and happy. "I watched you two every night," Mrs. Chen said softly. "I saw how much you loved each other. I saw how you never gave up." Frank hugged the album to his chest. "Thank you for watching over us." Mr. Peterson stepped forward with a big smile. "Frank, I have news. Morrison Hardware is opening a second store across town. I want you to be the manager." Frank's mouth dropped open. "Manager? But I've only been working there for a year." "You're the hardest worker I've ever had," Mr. Peterson said. "And customers love you and Cooper. Sales have gone up 30% since you started working for me." Frank looked at Cooper. "What do you think, boy? Want to help me run a hardware store?" Cooper barked once, which everyone took as a yes. As the sun started to set, the group began to leave. But Tom, Maria, and Frank stayed behind with Cooper. "Do you ever think about that night we followed you here?" Tom asked. Frank nodded. "I think about it every day. I was so scared you were going to stop me from seeing Cooper." "We almost did," Maria admitted. "We thought we were protecting Cooper by keeping him at the shelter. We didn't understand that you were his home." Frank knelt down and petted Cooper. "This dog taught me that love isn't about having the perfect situation. Love is about never giving up, even when everything seems impossible." "What's next for you two?" Tom asked. Frank smiled. Cooper and I are going to visit schools next month. We're going to talk to kids about the importance of taking care of animals and never giving up on the people you love. The famous dog and his dad teaching children, Maria said. I love it. As they walked back to Frank's car, Cooper suddenly stopped. He looked back at the oak trees where they used to camp. For just a moment, his ears went up like he was remembering something. It's okay, boy, Frank said gently. We're not staying here tonight. We're going home to our own bed. Cooper looked up at Frank and wagged his tail. Then he trotted happily toward the car. On the drive home, Frank thought about everything that had changed in 1 year. He had a job he loved, a home he could afford, and friends who cared about him. But most importantly, he had Cooper sleeping in the passenger seat beside him, no longer worried about when they would see each other again. When they got to their apartment, Frank made dinner while Cooper supervised from his favorite spot on the kitchen floor. After they ate, Frank pulled out his laptop to work on the speech he would give at the elementary school next week. What should I tell the kids about you? Frank asked Cooper. Cooper tilted his head, like he was thinking. I know, Frank said. I'll tell them that you're the bravest dog in the world. You escaped from a locked kennel every single night for 8 months, just to make sure I wasn't alone. Frank typed on his computer. Cooper taught me that real love means showing up, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when you don't know if things will get better. Cooper walked over and put his head on Frank's lap. I'll tell them that you never lost faith in me, even when I lost faith in myself, Frank continued, scratching Cooper behind the ears. Frank saved his speech and closed the laptop. It was time for their evening walk around the neighborhood. This had become their favorite part of every day. No rushing, no escaping, no worrying about tomorrow. Just a man and his dog, walking together in the sunshine. As they walked, neighbors waved and called out greetings. Hi, Frank. Hi, Cooper. The local kids always ran over to pet Cooper and hear stories about his adventures. You're a celebrity, Frank told Cooper as a little girl hugged him. But Cooper didn't care about being famous. He just cared about being with Frank. When they got back to their apartment, Frank and Cooper settled on the couch to watch the evening news. A story came on about a family in Oregon who had been reunited with their cat after being homeless for 6 months. They used Cooper's promise to get help, the reporter said. The program, named after the famous dog Cooper Morrison, has helped hundreds of families stay together during difficult times. Frank looked at Cooper, who was curled up next to him with his head on Frank's leg. Look at that, boy. We started something important. Cooper's tail wagged softly against the couch cushions. As they got ready for bed, Frank followed the same routine they had developed over the past year. He brushed Cooper's fur, filled his water bowl, and made sure his favorite tennis ball was next to his bed. Good night, son, Frank said, turning off the lights. Cooper settled on his dog bed right next to Frank's bed, close enough to touch, but both of them comfortable in their own spaces. Frank lay in the darkness, listening to Cooper's peaceful breathing. He thought about Mrs. Chen's photo album, with pictures showing their journey from desperation to hope, to happiness. He thought about all the people they had met and helped along the way. Tom and Maria, who saw past the rules to the love underneath. Susan, who believed in second chances. Mr. Peterson, who gave him work and dignity. Patricia, who helped him heal his invisible wounds. Most of all, he thought about Cooper, the puppy who had grown up in a war zone but never lost his gentle nature. The dog who had learned to open kennel latches because love finds a way. The friend who had slept on cardboard just to be close to him. We did it, Cooper, Frank whispered in the darkness. We kept our promises to each other. Cooper made a small, contented sound in his sleep. Outside, Sacramento slept peacefully. Somewhere in the city, there might be other people going through hard times, feeling alone and forgotten, but because of Frank and Cooper's story, there were now programs to help them. There were people who understood that families come in all shapes and sizes, and that love is worth fighting for. Frank closed his eyes and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new adventures. Maybe they would help another family stay together. Maybe they would inspire another person to never give up hope. But tonight, they were exactly where they belonged. Together, safe, and home at last. In the morning, Cooper would wake up and see Frank sleeping peacefully in the bed next to him. Frank would wake up and see Cooper's trusting brown eyes looking at him with pure love, and they would both know, without any doubt, that they were home. We'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and tell us your city or country. If this story touched your heart like it touched ours, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring true stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Most importantly, share this video with your friends and family. Stories like Cooper and Frank's remind us that kindness exists everywhere, that second chances matter, and that love, whether between a veteran and his dog or strangers helping each other, has the power to change lives. Together, we can spread more kindness and awareness, one story at a time. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.